This week on the show, we're celebrating our 200th episode. Woo! Bringing you news about the NetBSD 8.0 release process, which is underway. We try to measure the weight of an electron, and we look at stack clashing options, or whether these are options at all. So you might want to stick around even for this 200th episode of BSD. Now. BSD Now, episode 200. It's finally here. Recorded on the 28th of June 2017. Hi, I'm your host, Benedikt Reuschling.
And I'm Alan Jude.
And yes, we made it to 200 episodes. Well, I just came in the last quarter, or even less than that, but Alan pretty much sat into all 200 episodes until now. Yep. That's quite an achievement. Woo!
Yeah, 200 weeks in a row without missing an episode is a lot of commitment.
Yeah. And of course, many thanks to Chris Moore as well for being on the journey with Alan from the beginning and then letting me hang in.
All the people that we've interviewed that have helped us make the show what it is, and all the people who've written in and asked questions or pointed us at stories that we could cover and so on. The show wouldn't be possible without the other people that help as well, doing the things that we talk about, coming to and talking with us about them and so on.
Yeah. And the people who watch and listen to us every week, of course, those are the people that keep us going. And the people behind the scenes that are not that visible sometimes, who are doing the show notes and the editing and uploading episodes and things like that, also contribute to a well-made 200 episodes of BSD Now. Yeah, great. So let's go on to the next 200 because there's new stuff we have for you. So we should get right into our headlines this week. The first one is about NetBSD 8.0 release process that's going to be underway. And the post to NetBSD announce from Søren, I think it's Søren Jacobsen, has a little announcement here. What's that about, Alan?
He says, if you've been reading the source-changes list, you'll likely notice that the recent creation of the NetBSD 8 branch. If you haven't been reading, then here's some news. There's a NetBSD-8 branch, and that signals the beginning of the NetBSD 8.0 release process. We don't have a strict timeline for the release at this time, but things are looking pretty good at the moment, and we expect this release to happen in a shorter amount of time than the last couple of major releases did. At this point, we would love folks to test out the NetBSD-8 branch and let us know how it goes. A couple of major improvements since 7.0 are the addition of the USB 3.0 support and the overhaul of the audio subsystem, including a new in-kernel mixer. Feedback in these areas is particularly desired.
Okay.
You can grab the latest binaries from the daily-builds subdomain, and they have a link there. And they look forward to making 8.0 a stellar release.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. And if you're using it or are testing it somehow and find stuff, report your findings on the mailing list or send in something at feedback@bsdnow.tv and tell us how it works for you.
Yep. And as we'll have later in the show, in the roundup, FreeBSD 11.1 Beta 3 is out and needs testing as well.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So people are excited.
We're talking about new releases. Well, it's not quite a BSD. We kind of have adopted the Solarises because they're relatives of the BSDs. They're our only slightly lost cousin. OpenIndiana hipster 2017.04 has been released. So it includes quite a bit of stuff. Some of the major changes are, again, USB 3.0 device support. Intel KMS port has been reworked and means that most of the GPUs should work there. The Xorg server has been updated, Mate has been updated, and lots of end-user applications have been updated. They have all the text editors, like they ship Vim 8 now, and Emacs 25, etc. Newer versions of Firefox, Thunderbird, the NVIDIA driver. They have GCC 6 and 7. They've upgraded Ruby from 1.9 to 2.3. Perl is up to 5.24. They have the new 64-bit OpenJDK 8. Newer Git, Qt, Valgrind, Postgres, MongoDB, MariaDB, Percona, OpenVPN, Bind, Squid, Nginx, Apache, OpenSSH, Samba, TCPdump, Puppet, etc.
There's quite some refresh going on in the version. So it's good to try those out. And a lot of other bug fixes and minor software updates were also included, of course, in that release. So check that out and see how hipster that release is going to be. Next up is package source at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. So this one is a little bit longer, and it talks about basically why they use package managers in the first place. They start with valuable research is often hindered or outright prevented by the inability to install software. This need not be the case. And they talk a little bit about why or how they started their research computing in 1999. The author of that article frequently seen researchers struggle for days and weeks trying to install a single open source application. In most cases, they ultimately failed. And in many cases, they could have just easily installed the software in seconds with just one simple command using the package managers that we all know and love, like the Debian packages, the FreeBSD ports, Mac ports, or package source, just to name a few. And fortunately, the vast majority of open source software installed can be made trivial for anyone to just use these. And what is interesting about that is that package managers support building from source, like the port system for FreeBSD, Mac ports, and package source. Also offer build options for many packages, so you can customize the installation to your needs. And now they have the question, why package source in the first place? And they list a couple of reasons for that. And those are in order, or for them at least, portability, flexibility, modernity, quality and security, collaboration, convenience, and growth. And they go into each one a little bit more in detail and explaining what they do and what the actual reasons for those are. And that's the differentiator to other or to manual installations or to any other package management system. And then they have a getting started section for people who have never used package source before or are new to even package managers. Are there people still out there not having used the package manager? But they tell pretty much that you run a script, can be run as root and as an ordinary user, and in about 15 minutes you'll be ready to start installing packages. So that's the general bootstrapping going on to get the package manager registered in the system and finding the source that they need to build. And there are a couple of examples in that article as well, so people can follow that and try them out on their own. And there's also a little note to FreeBSD users. While package source can be used on FreeBSD, you may find that bootstrapping additional FreeBSD port trees is a better option. This will not provide exactly the same package collection as package source, but it will provide a bigger collection, like 27,000 ports at the same time of this writing. And you can also use the auto port setup script they linked from the article to get started. And then they have a section about...
Talk a bit about using binary packages, and basically they've converted the way the university research computers work so that they use package source to build the same set of packages for all the different supported operating systems. So whether you're using, something Red Hat based like CentOS or Scientific Linux, or if you're using Debian or Ubuntu, or if you're using NetBSD or FreeBSD, they use package source, build about 15,000 binary packages, and they're just all available and install and work on whichever environment the researcher wants to do their work in. And it seems like this has helped the university's research department quite a lot.
Because everyone is on the same base of packages, and they can rely on these and know that a certain version will be the same regardless where they install it. And they could probably, or are doing the provisioning of the packages. You don't have to download them from some source on the internet, but you can keep that within the university itself, and they usually have good networking going on, that it's easier to fetch it from the local network and without going out into the wide world fetching packages here and there.
Yep. They also note that Joyent provides pre-built binary packages for SmartOS and Illumos, Red Hat Enterprise Linux and CentOS, and even OS 10.
Oh yeah, that's good for people to, and they provide the package repository for the Milwaukee, Wisconsin mirrors there, so people can bind that into their own mirrors and fetch from there if they're in the area, and then it's pretty much using it. And there's also a section about contributing to package source, like how to get started and maybe put in your own little package in there, or helping to fix a package or update it. And it walks people through like joining the package source users mailing list and learning to fix how to create packages and updating one. There's all kinds of links in this article for people to get started in that. And another section at the end is building your own binary packages. So there are many ways to go about building binary packages, many sets of instructions for doing so. And the approaches they use is to be as simple and as safe as possible. And they provide instructions below how to build a package building environment for people on CentOS. But it could be pretty much any system that can make use of package source. It doesn't have to be CentOS only. And that's pretty much all the instructions needed, with like create a couple of tar files and untar them, and then provide them at the same positions where package source can pick them up and get started from there.
Yep.
So it's a good article, and people who want to get more into package source, you can use that and see how to use the system in their own applications or in their own research, without having to reinvent the wheel all the time.
Yep. I've heard of other people using package source to do provide one set of packages across multiple operating systems. So I'm very interested in seeing more of that. If you have to work in a heterogeneous environment where you have a bunch of different operating systems, being able to have one consistent set of packages is really helpful.
Yeah, it could also be a company. I mean, it isn't limited to research and universities.
If you have to have Linux and BSD servers, using something like package source to make sure you have the same packages on both, and you can have your same versions, and you can lockstep them all together, and everything will be compiled with the same options, would be really helpful. I'm a little spoiled. In our environment, we have like 110 FreeBSD machines and like 16 Linux machines. And it's like all the FreeBSD ones have like custom massaged versions of rsync with extra patches and our own patches to OpenSSH and so on. And the Linux ones have whatever comes with CentOS.
Just the default.
Oh, my script doesn't work because the rsync doesn't support the time limit option on Linux, and or doesn't have that patch. Or I would love to be able to force Linux to use the same prefix so that, Java is always user local bin Java, not user bin Java sometimes
or
on
opt,
Linux and so on.
Or,
and so on and so on. So I'd like to hear more about this.
Mm-hmm.
This week's episode is brought to you by IX Systems. If you go over to ixsystems.com/BSD now, you can find out more about what it means to use IX to build your next open source server. And you can experience for yourself just how nice that experience is, right? You get a quote that's quick and accurate. You get the right hardware for your project, because they don't just ask you, how big of a machine do you want? They ask, well, what do you want to do? And what level of performance do you need? And we'll build a machine that will be able to do at least that all the time. In the worst case scenario, it'll still be able to deliver what your requirements are. The servers are very well built. You see cut to length SATA cables and stuff, so there's no extra cable blocking up airflow, but you have everything just right. It's so nice to see the level of care that goes into actually putting the servers together. And everything shows up when you need it. You're like, I need a server, and they're gonna build it for you exactly to your order. Put it through their QA and testing, where they burn it in for a couple days and make sure that if there's a component that's faulty, they're gonna find that and replace it before they ship it to you, which is really really helpful. And you get white glove support that's not outsourced.
Yeah, it's really from the people that are building these systems, and they know how these systems work. And they're also not shy of posting pictures about them. For example, on their blog, they have a little preview on their new TrueNAS X10, which is just third generation of TrueNAS unified storage line. And they posted a couple of pictures, not only from the outside, but also from the inside. So you can see how the system looks. And it's also can have custom built systems, like for a specific purpose or a specific use case, but you could also ask them to just ship me enough systems, or one system that has as many drives as possible, and they will build you that to that specific purpose. Yeah, so check out IX Systems and their server line of different all-flash drives, TrueNAS, the certified servers, or the FreeNAS Mini even, and see whether some of those systems might be a good fit in your data center or your little home data center that you might have.
Yep. So our next story is kind of fun.
Yeah, this is called measuring the weight of an electron. So you might think, well, what's a physics blog doing in this one? But it's actually about the electron software, and it's a blog post written by Aaron Bieber, and he goes on, or starts with, I'm going to measure the weight of an electron. By weight he means what it takes to make electron work on OpenBSD. And he has a little disclaimer at the beginning saying that this is a long rant. A rant intended to document lunacy, hopefully aid others in the future, and make myself feel better about something I think is crazy. It may seem like I'm making an enemy of Electron, but keep in mind that it isn't his intention. The enemy here is complexity. So how does this start, Alan?
Yes. So he also mentions that along for the ride is his friend Henry, the canary.
Okay, so yeah, I'll do the canary when it comes up.
So he says that at first glance, Electron seems like a pretty solid app. It has decent docs, it's consolidated into a single repo, and it has lots of visibility. Porting it shouldn't be that big of a deal, right? So first thing is clone the GitHub repo. If you want to follow along, you can see the build instructions for Linux doc. Reading through the doc, first off, you'll notice that apparently you need at least 25 gigabytes of free space. And it's like, well, okay, so the source code repo is 47 megabytes, and it's somehow going to generate 25 gigabytes of files?
I glance at Henry, he gives me the what look. We carry on. Clang 3.4 or later apparently is needed, but more on this later. He continues with the build, and he knows he has two versions of Clang installed on OpenBSD now, one from ports and one in base. Hopefully he will be able to tell the build to use one of these versions. And indeed, Electron has that ability, and their example is even using the same prefix OpenBSD's Clang port is using. So he runs the bootstrap script, and it doesn't work.
Yeah. And looking at it, and it says key error, OpenBSD 6. So it looks like in its configure script, it doesn't know that OpenBSD is a thing. So he has to go in here and add, or I think it's OpenBSD 6. They have 5, but not 6. So he had to add 6 to their little platform map to tell it that it exists.
Okay. Then you rerun the bootstrap, and things seem to be going well. Then the Henry squeaks. Wow! Next thing is it starts synchronizing modules. You know how this goes in Git. And of course, something happens because it cannot fetch a certain repository, and there's errors, but the script continues. So apparently there's a Boto repository, but the build's still going on. It tries to fetch this at a later time. Does it mean this is an optional dependency?
Failed to fetch because the time zone was invalid. So it turns out you had to disable the FSCK option in Git so that Git wouldn't check for that kind of thing.
Okay, why wouldn't it?
The same problem with this other requests repo, and in addition to Boto. Yeah. This is off in the distance we catch a familiar tune. It almost sounds like a gnarly Barkley song. So, turns off the Git FSCK stuff.
And then it continues, going on into another subprocess error, trying to download a pre-built lib chromium content that's referenced in the doc again, the build doc at the beginning, finding --lib_lib chromium content option and rerun. And this time he's faced with a lot of dots on the command line and having no idea what's happening. So looking in top, you can see that Python process is in a wait state of net.io. Maybe it's downloading something, and looking at the electron_wut directory, sure enough reveals a growing file named chromium 5.8 tard xz, and we let it finish downloading. Out of curiosity, we look at vendor/lib chromium content /script/update. It seems its purpose is to download and extract chromium, clang, and node. Good thing we already specified --clang there, or it might try to build clang again. 544 dots and 45 minutes later, we have an error. You have to just wait for the build to finish, but just at 99% or something, you have an error. Does that sound familiar to you? Yeah, the Chromium 5.8 file is mysteriously not there anymore. Interesting. Scrolling up in the terminal points us to something disheartening. So there's some extraction going on, but then...
it does appear to be downloading and building Clang again.
Yet again. Oh dear. At this point, we have to shift projects. No longer we are working on Electron. It's lib chromium content that needs our attention, which brings us into fixing subtools. So it starts with cloning the lib chromium content Git repository and following the instructions in that repo to run script/bootstrap. It seems to complete without issue, but on the next step, it starts creating more dots. This is the second time waiting 45 minutes for a 500 or a little more megabyte file to download. The second time, so we're already at 1 hour 30 minutes just building the dependencies for that. And in this one, there are also some couple of sys edits needed so that it doesn't re-download and re-compile those Chromium ports again. So 544 dots and 43 minutes later, the Chromium tar.gz is safe. But since he learned from his experience earlier on, he copied that to a safe space directory just in case he might need it, and the port deletes it again.
So stop downloading every time it doesn't work.
Oh dear, yeah, that's not very good of a script to install. But that is overcome by saving the binary, and so in the whole script, this is requested or repeated about 50 times, and the trend seems to be ignore errors, they're stupid and meaningless anyway. As Chromium extracts, Henry and I can't shake the feeling that everything until now was just the tip of the iceberg. They are right. So what happens next is they remove the call to update Clang because, well, they have 2 copies of it already, and the Electron doc says everything should be fine if we had just Clang 3.4. Okay, but then the script or the build fails, which isn't good. In the meantime, Henry's lovely yellow plumage seems to be becoming a darker shade of yellow. How much more of this can we take? If we have learned anything so far, it has to be errors don't matter. This one, however, warrants further investigation. So we dig deeper into script/update. And what does this do? Oh, yeah, there's no pre-built version for OpenBSD for that one. So at this point, they're getting really irritated So they try to bring out the big guns because now they have to leverage the countless hours of work that had already been into the probably building these components. So as it turns out, there's they have to bootstrap GN, the tool to generate Ninja files. And if you've used Ninja, it's part of the Open. It's also a Chromium. Yeah, it's part of the Chromium.
It's a build system thing.
Yeah,
kind of like
and they use that. Mm-hmm.
So it turns out that there's already, this has been ported and dealt with in the actual Chromium port, and so he can just kind of wire around updating Clang, Ninja, and Node, and just use the versions from the ports tree.
Yeah, why rebuild everything all the time if you already have it? Then another build error happens at a rerun after that has been compiled. So there's a section, also there's a build /linux/debian_wheezy. Wheezy, where is that getting set? We stop and ponder, how the hell did we get here? What could have possibly warranted abandoning makefiles and shell scripts in favor of this monstrosity? Just for fun, let's try to run the second step, which is the one that failed earlier in the build process. Just try that one again. And another error starts appearing. And clearly, from the output, it seems that they're dealing with a beast that's too smart for its own good. Now they're going into fixing sub tools, because those fail as well. And since depot_tools is a Google project, it's easier to edit the files in the vendor directory and pretend nothing ever happened. So they pretty much, so there's a shell script there, and there's a default section in a switch case, and they just comment that out because it also tries to detect the operating system properly, and it doesn't work for OpenBSD 6. So they remove that default and just let it run the
If you
bin.
encounter an unsupported OS, try running Ninja instead of just giving up right away.
Yeah. So many assumptions. Let's continue the trend. So they rerun the build script, and you might have guessed it, no luck. At this point, we are faced with a complex web of Python scripts that execute GN on GN files to produce Ninja files, which then build the various components, and somewhere in that cluster, something doesn't know about OpenBSD. And in closing, it says, I look at Henry, he's looking at a photo of his wife and kids. They're sitting on a telephone wire, the morning sun illuminating their beautiful faces. Henry looks back at me and says, it's not worth it. We slam the laptop shut and go outside. Yeah, I can already see how ports people or package source people feel about porting software to the various operating systems, or making it independent enough so that not a single operating system is overlooked, or that there aren't any hard-coded paths in there or things like that.
It seems like, especially with some of these bigger projects, it's just like, so we want to install this. That involves installing libchromium, which then involves building the Ninja system, and then, we end up with this giant tree of dependencies. Like, why do I need 400 different ports just to build this one port?
There's just one library I need to use, and, well, I might as well install the whole Chromium thing. People have fast machines. Well, some of them have, and there's also embedded people who don't want to waste those cycles to build these huge things. So yeah, it's a problem. And you wonder how big these binaries have become over time that are running on your systems. These are all dependencies trying to being shoved into the binary just to get it
a bunch
running.
of this is build dependencies. You only need it to compile it. The actual resulting binary doesn't include any of it, but some of it, yeah.
Yeah, we have build dependencies and run dependencies are different
Like
beasts.
if you're pulling in the entire libchromium content for like one feature, it's like, does that make sense?
Is this worth it? Is it really worth it? Is Electron available on FreeBSD or in other operating systems? Not yet, because of that porting effort. Probably everyone shied away from that.
Well, apparently it can run on Windows, and if they can make it work on Windows, it can't be that hard.
Okay.
Although I'm not saying how much work it was to make it work on Windows. So.
Yeah, that might be. Yeah, then you are in DLL hell already. That's a different story. Okay, yeah, it's a nice report about how ports could go horribly wrong, or I just want to try to get this software running. How hard could it be? Yeah, it's not nice, but it's a good write-up to see what kind of problems he bumped into and the solutions he came up with to get to the next stage. Up next is our news roundup for this week, starting with Ghost for Unix released on the 18th birthday of that software. So that's been around for a while. I remember it from my days where I was looking at onlamp.com, which featured some of the articles for Ghosts for Unix. So that one is Ghost for Unix 2.6 has been released, and Hubert Feirer, who is the author of the Ghost for Unix software, writes to the NetBSD users archive list, telling everyone that after a 5-year period of beta testing and updating, he has finally released Ghost for Unix 2.6. With its origins in 1999, it's like to say, happy 18th birthday, Ghost for Unix. Woo! You can legally drink in some countries now. Well, if you are up to that as a software. So people who have asked, well, what is Ghost for Unix? Even after 18 years, people still might be new to this software. G4U, Ghost for Unix, or Ghosting for Unix, is a NetBSD-based boot floppy/CD-ROM that allows easy cloning of PC hard disks to deploy a common setup on a number of PCs using FTP. The floppy/CD-ROM offers 2 functions. The first is to upload a compressed image to a local hard disk or to an FTP server. The other is to restore that image via FTP, uncompress it, and write it back to disk. Network configuration is fetched via DHCP, and as the hard disk is processed as an image, any file system and operating system can be deployed using Ghost for Unix. Easy cloning of local disks as well as partitioning is also supported. And then he continues with the past. So he writes, when I started Ghost for Unix, I had the task to install a number of lab machines with a dual boot of Windows NT and NetBSD. That sounds familiar for me. The hype was about Microsoft's Zero Administration Kit, or ZAK. Then, but that did barely work for the Windows part. File transfers were slow, dependent on the client's hardware, a lot required filling of MS-DOS network driver disks, and on the ZAK server, the files for installing happened to disappear for no good reason every now and then. Not working yet, and leaving out NetBSD and everything else, he created Ghost for Unix. This gave him the relative pain of getting things working once, but with the option to easily add network drivers that as they appeared in NetBSD. And oh, they did. Plus allowed him to install any operating system. So that's the past. The present is they've used Ghost for Unix successfully in our labs then, booting from CD-ROM. He also got many donations from public and private institutions, plus companies.
Companies just spelled out.
Yeah, companies from many sectors, indicating that Ghost for Unix does make a difference. And in the meantime, the world has changed. CD-ROMs aren't used that much anymore. Network boot and USB sticks are today's devices of choice. Cloning of a full disk without knowing the structure has both advantages, but also disadvantages. And Ghost for Unix user's interface is still command line based, with not much space for automation. For storage, FTP servers are nice and fast, but alternatives like SSH, SFTP, NFS, iSCSI, and Samba for remote storage plus local storage, back to fun with file systems, anyone? Avoiding this was why Ghost for Unix was created in the first place. Should be considered these days. Further aspects include integrity, well, checksums, confidentiality, encryption. And this leaves a number of open points to address either by future releases or by other products. And what's the future going to hold, Alan?
He says, at this point, my time budget for G4U is very limited. I welcome people to contribute to G4U. It's an open source project for a reason, and feel free to give back any of the changes that you want to contribute. The major changes in version 2.6 is it's now based on NetBSD current as of, April 17th, shortly before the NetBSD 8 branch point. And the binaries were cross-compiled from a Mac running OS X. He says that provides many new drivers, bug fixes, and improvements from NetBSD-current. Go back to keep the disk image inside the kernel as a RAM disk. Do not load it to the as a separate module. This is less error-prone and allows to boot G4U kernel from a single file via PXE, and so on. Additionally, they do provide the G4U kernel with the embedded G4U disk image from now on as a separate file, which is g4u-kernel.gz. They've also added the MD5 and SHA-512 checksum tools to the image so that you can use those.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah, I remember the first couple times I used G4U, I found it quite useful. Lately, I've mostly just fired up a FreeBSD install image, dropped to the shell, and done it manually. But if I was doing bulk, this would have been interesting. I used a somewhat similar tool once. There's one called MFTP or something. There was one that did multicast. It was a multicast FTP over UDP daemon. So the way it worked is you set up a bunch of machines listening on the multicast address, and then one machine would send an image, and what it would do is send the entire file, and the clients would receive it as a UDP multicast message, and they would send back negative acknowledgements, any packets of the file they didn't get. And so the sender would build up this list of all the negative acknowledgements it's got. Then it would do an entire second pass over the file, only sending bits that one or more clients didn't receive.
Yeah.
And it would just repeat that process until every client had received every block.
Oh, makes
I'd always
sense,
been interested in using that to do disk imaging. The way the tool was written and with the seeking, I wasn't sure if it would be able to handle writing to hard drive because you do it kind of out of order. But
yeah, you have to find the right.
I ended up having to do imaging of multiple machines again, that's what I would like to look at doing, is being able to just send from one machine to all the other machines using multicast, so you only send it once instead of once to each machine, right? So if you need to image 40 machines in a computer lab, you could do it in the amount of time it takes to send, the 100 gigabytes once instead of times 40.
Yeah, we're using a solution called a FOG and a PHI. PHI is a fully automated installation solution. Those combine, so the lab engineers basically upload images and then they can distribute that into their labs via multicast, well, when it works. We had some issues with it. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it works only for half of the machines, or one machine decides not to participate in the multicast. And it's all kind of crazy stuff, but it helps a lot if you have many machines to roll out with new images.
Yeah, this multicast one, I forget the exact name of it, but it was originally designed by, I think, a newspaper or a news agency to do distribution of images over satellite.
Oh, that's an interesting.
They would want to send up to the satellite once and have multiple base stations all receive it.
Huh.
But it was UDP multicast over satellite was what it was built for. So it was pretty good on the reliability front because...
Yeah, understandably. Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, so people should, if you have a good story about Ghost for Unix, send it to us and we'll cover it in the show notes or ask us a question.
I know I've used it before. I'm glad to see that they still make it.
Yeah, it's 18 years is a lot for software. I mean, keeping it updated and, providing the support for it and fixing bugs, and it's impressive. Okay, so next up is a article called Fixing FreeBSD Networking on DigitalOcean. And
yes, so this one's interesting. Like most cloud or VPS providers, they use some form of semi-automated address assignment rather than just telling you what your IP address is and expecting you to configure it or whatever. Because the idea is that, you create this image that has the magic in it, and then you can just boot it up and assign lots of them. Identical machines will pick up their IP address properly. Sometimes, however, especially during the upgrade process of switching major versions of the OS or whatever, something about that can break, and that's what this story is about. So the author of this blog post says, I decided it was time to upgrade my FreeBSD DigitalOcean droplet because the version I was using, FreeBSD 10.1, was well past its end of life. Shame on me. And he was going to switch to a modern version, FreeBSD 10.3, because that has support until April 2018. And then he's like, well, maybe I should even just go to FreeBSD 11 because that will have support until 2021 if he keeps up with the minor version releases. He says, there are no sensitive files on the VMs, so I had put off doing the update. But he says, additionally, cloud providers tend to have sometimes shoddy support for BSDs, so breakage after messing with the kernel or init system can really happen. So he says the last straw for him, though, was the fact that FreeBSD switched the package builds to using 10.3. And so then when he did a package update or whatever, package broke because it couldn't find the OpenNat symbol because it was now built against the newer version of FreeBSD. So he ran FreeBSD update, did the fetch, the upgrade, and then installed it and rebooted onto the new kernel. So he waited, and after 30 seconds, no SSH. He's like, well, maybe it's still booting. Wait 1 minute,
yeah.
2 minutes. Nope, still can't log in. He logged into the DigitalOcean control panel and saw the green status light saying the instance was up and everything was fine. Fortunately, DigitalOcean provides console access. So this gives you a view of the BIOS level of the machine and lets you do whatever you need to do to the machine if something goes wrong.
Single user mode.
Sometimes it's a little slow, and it apparently kept crashing his browser if he tried to run ping. He ran ifconfig, and it showed that the VTnet 0, which is his public interface, and VTnet 1, which is a private interface, didn't have IP addresses. Oops. So he looked through a bunch of RC files and found the rc.digitalocean.d. There's supposed to be a file called dropletid.conf, which with actually like the ID of your droplet. And it says, it seems that FreeBSD wasn't picking up DigitalOcean's network config file. The quick and dirty way would be messing with the contents of those files and just configure his IP address. But he looked at the script some more, and he saw that it is actually, to get the ID, it was running a curl command to that magic cloud address 169.254.169.254. And it seems that curl timed out or errored out one time, and so the droplet ID was set to blank. And then when it created the symlink, it created a .conf file instead of a number.conf file and made that a symlink to the droplet.conf. And so it lost his settings. So he restored the symlink properly and started the networking and got it working. And that was the fix. And he was able to run the update and finish upgrading to 10.3. Then he decided to, while he had it fresh in his mind how he had fixed this in case things go wrong, he decided to do the upgrade to FreeBSD 11 while he was there. He did the update, and it turned out everything worked fine. So he did the update, installed a new kernel, rebooted, and updated the user land, updated his packages, and did all of the stuff he needs to do.
Oh, okay. So that's pretty much just...
a missing bit of error checking in their script there meant that it overwrote the config file with an empty one if the curl command ever fails.
Yeah, just in case.
Yeah. So there was that. He says, the DigitalOcean team can make our lives easier by having their init scripts do more thorough system checking, catching broken symlinks or, noting that the droplet ID came back blank and so not doing anything and just trying again next time or whatever. Or printing a helpful error message and so on. I would prefer that DigitalOcean not customize the version of FreeBSD they ship quite so much and have their... I understand they got some changes in there to make it work with their address assignment and so on, but making sure that those sit cleanly off to the side, don't get integrated into RC files that are going to cause merge conflicts when you try to update to a newer version of FreeBSD and so on.
Yeah, I mean, that's their part that they need for their infrastructure to get it working properly and making it easy for people to spin up machines.
Right, and they've come a long way since then. When they first did the original adding of FreeBSD, and when they created the 10.1 image, they didn't really know many FreeBSD people. And they kind of did this in a vacuum. Whereas since then, now they have lots of FreeBSD customers, and they have lots of... they've been on the mailing list and so on, and actually talked to people and
that's feedback.
Found the better ways to do things and have access to resources when they need them, things have gotten a lot better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but of course, they could always use more feedback from people that are using BSD on DigitalOcean. Are you having trouble? Is there something you'd like to see? They would love to hear from you.
Yeah, and there's nothing like this nice email that they get in the morning from people. Hey, I'm using your service for like 2 or 3 weeks or something, and it's working great. I'm running FreeBSD happily in the cloud, and thanks for providing its services. All kinds of nice emails also help these people know that we are out there and using their products with FreeBSD.
Yep. If you want FreeBSD support to continue to be a priority for them, do let them know. If you're not already using DigitalOcean to run your FreeBSD virtual machines, you should check it out.
Yep.
If you go over to DigitalOcean.com, you can sign up for as little as $5 a month. You can get a FreeBSD VM with 512 megs of RAM, a core, 20 gigs of SSD back storage, and a terabyte of transfer. Or for $10, you can get twice all of that. It's super easy. It takes less than 55 seconds to boot up and be running FreeBSD. You can choose between 10.3 or 11 and UFS or ZFS. It all works very nice. They've added a lot of features recently. You can add private networking between your VMs. They have a firewall now. They have load balancers, monitoring system. They have external block storage, so you can buy storage in individual gigabyte increments as whatever you need, whether it's 100 gigs or 16 terabytes. You can add that as separate storage that's outside of the VM and then mounted, and you can run ZFS on it or whatever. And then you can even throw away your droplet and get a different one and connect it to that storage. Mm-hmm. So, if you want to have a remote backup machine, it's a great way to do it.
Yep, and they're currently running a new thing, an introduction to their new object storage that they have. They describe it as the simplest way to cost-effectively store, serve, backup, and archive a virtually infinite amount of media, web content, images, and static files for your web applications. And you can sign up there with your email and receive 1 terabyte for free through October 31st, 2017. So this is an early access thing. Cool. But if you actually need to store that much amount of data in your virtual machine, you might as well check out that new object storage that they have.
Yeah, the nice thing with DigitalOcean is because you have that console access, you can use the Geli disk encryption on your either the VM OS itself or on the block storage, and be able to enter it at boot time via that console, and make it so that the VM only works when you type in the password.
More security always helps.
So our next story, I'm sure you've already heard about the stack clash.
It's in the news, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So this is some OS research that was done by Quali's security group.
Researchers.
So they found basically 3 different parts to this. The one is the way, so the stack grows down and the heap grows up. Something like that. And so these 2 different regions of memory can eventually run into each other. That's the stack clash. Most operating systems have this concept of what's called a stack guard page. There's a specific 4K block of memory at the end of the stack, and if you try to touch it, it will crash the app. And the idea is that if somebody tries to go down through it or up through it, it'll crash the app.
They meet in the middle, yeah.
Yeah. The problem is that if you're going down towards the wall and then you allocate a very large chunk of memory, you can jump right over that page. And as long as you don't actually touch that bit, then you can end up not crashing the app.
Yeah, and people are always asking, is this exploitable? Is this security relevant even? Can people do malicious things with that? And that's what they are trying to find out in this. Is it an actual advisory? Yeah, it's a security advisory.
Yes, well, they issued it as a security advisory, although it's not... this in itself is a problem with the mitigation that's supposed to stop an application being successfully exploited. It's not an exploit in itself.
What are the mitigation techniques that have been implemented in various systems have been successful, or do they actually work for that kind of problem?
So using this research, though, they have managed to make some exploits. They have one for XIM and some sudo-based ones that apparently only affected Linux. And so this research shows how they can work around the mitigation that are supposed to stop this type of attack. It's still the fact that there has to be an application running with privileges that has a flaw in it for you to be able to use this technique to still exploit it when it might have been blocked by mitigations. So
many things have to come.
In addition to all the research here, you would also need an application with a vulnerability in it in order to exploit it. And as Sean Webb points out in the chat room, it's extremely difficult to effectively exploit remotely, but it can work easily, relatively easily locally if you have an application that has a problem in it. And they found a bunch of those in
different
advisory here, where you can see there's local root exploit for ld.so on Debian, Fedora, and CentOS. This is also almost all of the exploits that they've managed only work on i386 because of the much smaller memory regions.
Yeah, that's easier to exploit in this way because you only have so many.
But they do have some of the CVE numbers here are for AMD 64 stuff as well.
And so
they also covered NetBSD, OpenBSD, FreeBSD, and Solaris.
So it's relevant for pretty much everyone, or just at least looking into those, whether it's affecting their system.
Sorry, what was that?
Like it's pretty much relevant for everyone, just looking at these stack clashing probabilities, let's say, and whether it applies to a certain software kind of exploit, or if it's actually exploitable, or whether the anti-exploitation measures are still working or are effective against that.
So there's a post on the FreeBSD security mailing lists, which basically says that this was being worked on by FreeBSD's people that are knowledgeable in the VM subsystem, because that's where this mostly comes in. And they specifically thanks Qualies for the high quality research and for providing the proof of concept code. But that's resulted in an actual commit now as well.
A couple of days ago.
Yep, be about 3.5 days ago now. But we have address space guard now. They map the entire size of the stack space, I think, with the They create a guard requested with mmap with the map guard flag, prevents the reuse of this allocated address space. It does not allow instances of the pages in the array. It is useful for more explicit support for usual two-stage reserve and then later commit allocators, since it prevents accidental instantiation of the mappings. So they use those guards to re-implement the stack growing code, explicitly track the stack grow area with the guard, including the stack guard page. On stack growth, the trivial shift of the guard map entries and stack map entries limits making the stack expansion run over the end. And they've moved some of the code around and stuff. But now you should find that the proof of concept code provided by Qualies doesn't manage to crash the stack on or clash the stack on FreeBSD head anymore, and it should be MFC'd in time for FreeBSD 11.1 and 10.4.
So they will have that, and we'll probably backport it to the stable releases as well.
Yep. In addition, HardenedBSD has done a bunch of interesting stuff.
Yeah, they have a couple of GitHub commits to implement fixes, or not even making it work anymore.
Well, basically, they followed the Quali's idea of making the guard page, instead of a 4K block of memory, it would actually be a 2 megabytes they did, so that it much harder to jump over that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess we'll hear about other operating systems in the coming weeks, I guess, because I guess NetBSD and OpenBSD is also trying to not only look into that, but if they find something to fix or have similar fixes.
Yeah, one of the proof of concept ones for OpenBSD is using the @ command. Although when the Qualis tried to work on the proof of concept for it, it required making 40 million files in the var cron @jobs directory, and they found that the UFS or FFS version in OpenBSD, once you get millions of files in the directory, it starts slowing down to the point that after a week, they had only managed to create 4 million files out of the 40 million files.
Okay, that takes more time to set that up.
They had to, so what Qualis did to prove their exploit was hack the readdir syscall with a preloaded library to return 40 million files, even though the files didn't exist on the disk.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
there's a proof of concept
people have to
linked on the Quali site for that one as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, those are a bunch of hoops you have to jump into just to exploit that specific issue, if it's actually an issue on OpenBSD, which I don't think it is. But it's good that people are looking into this, and people are aware of it now, and they will test their systems accordingly and release patches for fixes and making sure that this will be guarded properly.
Yeah, but mostly it's dependent on the attacker being able to allocate very large chunks of memory, which in most server type apps would be a problem already, because they could just use that to exhaust all the memory in the system and do a denial of service attack. And most of the fix will be in the application that has the problem, but might as well fix the mitigations and do that bit of it as well.
Yeah, while you're there already. Okay, good to know. So we'll monitor this and provide updates. And if people find something or have reports about this on other operating systems in the BSD world, then we'll be happy to report about those in the coming shows that are happening.
Yep.
So another story is, will ZFS and non-ECC RAM kill your data? Oh, that sounds scary, but actually there is an article about this. And it starts with, this comes up far too often, so rather than continuing to explain it over and over again, I'm going to try to do a really good job of it once and link to it here. So that article is from 2015, although the questions haven't stopped already.
So this is a bit of ZFS folklore that's been going on for a long time, and I'm glad to have a well-written explanation to point people to explain what's actually going on here. Mm-hmm. But the TLDR version of this is that ECC RAM is good. You should use it if you can. But just because you can't doesn't mean that you shouldn't use ZFS. Having ZFS is always better than not having ZFS.
Yeah, always.
Just like having ECC RAM is always better than not having ECC RAM.
Yeah, no argument there.
So yeah, it starts off with an explanation of what ECC RAM is, and everybody agrees that this is a good idea. And then an explanation of what ZFS is. And as far as I know, everyone agrees this is a good idea.
A good idea.
So it says, is ZFS with non-ECC RAM worse for your data than having a not ZFS file system with your non-ECC RAM? And turns out, if you don't have ECC RAM, at least ZFS might notice that there's a problem and yell about it, whereas most other file systems would just happily go on their way and not even realize that something is wrong. So at least ZFS will sound the alarm, even if it can't do anything about it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there might be some bit flipping going on in the RAM, but the ECC prevents pretty much that, or it has ways of doing the error correcting code, which this stands for. And if you don't have ECC, then ZFS can do the checksum comparison if you have a redundant pool, and then will heal itself automatically in the background.
Right. So the main thrust of the people that are concerned about running ZFS on not ECC is this idea of the scrub of death that originally started as a thread on the FreeNAS forum.
Okay.
And the kind of scenario they came up with for this is that, you have some evil RAM that's flipping a bit or has a stuck bit. And as you're doing the scrub, it's going to read perfectly good data off the disk and say that it's bad. And so this is going to result in it, shredding your whole file system or something. But what would normally happen in ZFS is that, okay, I read a block and it was bad. I'm going to find the redundant copy of this block, whether it's a copy off the other side of a mirror, or if it's just metadata, there's already multiple copies stored, or it's off RAID Z, whatever. It reads a good copy, and it will overwrite this supposedly bad copy, although actually fine copy, with actually fine data. Mm-hmm. And so that's not going to break anything. It's waste a little bit of disk time, but
yeah, your data is still safe and sound, and the way you stored it originally.
So the concern here is that the horror story version of this one was, thinking that every block of data is going to go through this thing and be corrupted or whatever. But that's not quite how memory management works. It explains it very well here. But even if you have, say, 1 in every 5,000 blocks goes through that bad area, and that could still make a mess of your file system. Luckily, ZFS usually is not going to go that far. If it gets that many errors, it's going to eject the disk and say, there's something wrong with that.
Yeah, it's good to have it in a very well-written document so people can point other people to it.
One of the important ones is if ZFS reads a block, thinks it's bad, tries to read the other copy of the block, and also thinks that's bad, it's going to say, okay, I can't read that block, and not touch it.
Yeah.
And then if you do another scrub and try to read it again, it's going to read it and be like, oh, actually, it's fine.
Yeah, no worries.
And so if all the copies are bad, it's not going to suddenly break your perfectly good data. And so it goes on from there. Anyway, it has a good explanation of why that's not the way it actually works, and that the scrub of death is not really a thing.
Yeah, it's a mystery, or it's not a scenario people might worry about.
Yeah. So then he's got, I've constructed a doomsday scenario featuring evil RAM enough to kill my data after all. Mwahaha. It's like, sure, but our question wasn't, can ZFS deal with bad RAM? We know that it really can. The question was, is using ZFS, if you happen to have this possibly evil RAM, worse than, say, using ext4 or UFS or something with this evil RAM? And in the end, the same amount of data is likely to get smashed. On ZFS, you'll just more likely to be told about it before it gets out of hand, and there's a chance that it will be able to recover it versus other times probably not. If you just have a regular mirror rather than a ZFS mirror, it doesn't have a checksum at all, so it doesn't know that the copy it read is bad. It just uses it. And it doesn't know that the two mirrors maybe are out of sync if something did go bad.
Yeah.
So then it's got this interesting headline. I really, really want to use the scrub of death in a movie or TV show. How could I make it happen? And it turns out, while evil RAM is evil, what you really have to worry about is an evil disk controller.
Ooh.
This is another thing that only ZFS can help you with, but in the end, ZFS is somewhat limited, right? If you say write this block of data to the disk controller and it writes it to the wrong place on disk or messes it up before it writes it, ZFS will at least be able to detect that when it reads it, and hopefully it didn't corrupt every copy you wrote. But in the end, ZFS is more concerned about never giving you wrong data than anything else.
Yeah.
So
that's the main purpose. And that's what it's built for.
If it means that data is lost and you have to get it from your backup, that's what it means. But ZFS is never going to say that data is right when it's not. That's the important thing.
Yeah, you can sleep very, very well knowing that your data is on ZFS and not on any other file system from the earlier ages.
Yes, and then lastly, I don't care about your logic. I wish to appeal to the authority. And so the author here says the authority in this case will be none other than Matt Ahrens, the co-founder of ZFS at Sun. And he actually commented in the file systems article about ZFS on Ars Technica and provided a very similar quote for me for the ZFS book. And he says, there's nothing special about ZFS that requires or encourages the use of ECC RAM more so than any other file system. You want to use ECC RAM to have a reliable machine. ZFS doesn't necessarily require that. If you're using ZFS, it shows good judgment and that you really want to keep your files. And if you really want to keep your files, you probably also want ECC RAM.
Yeah. And I mean, that makes it also attractive for people to use it on laptops or devices that aren't regarded that secure.
There's only about one laptop that I know of that has ECC RAM. But for smaller machines, the newest, the Skylake and Kaby Lake like Pentium CPUs support ECC now. I know Intel's kind of waffled back and forth on that one. But I know the AMD Ryzens are all going to support ECC as well. So we're definitely going to soon be to the point where you can build a low-power home NAS with ECC without having to buy a server-grade processor and so on. But in the end, if you really care about the data on your NAS, maybe you're willing to spend the extra little bit of money to have a server-grade motherboard with ECC RAM anyway.
Right. Yeah, that's the gist of it.
How much do you love your data? It's up to you.
Now it's time for our BSD Bits section this week. The first one is the EuroBSDCon 2017 travel grant application is now open on the FreeBSD Foundation website. It's just a short announcement. Pretty much people can find the travel grant application link from the announcement section, and people can go to the FreeBSD Foundation website, go to grants, and then find the form to fill out and to apply for that one directly linked from here. Pretty much there's a deadline for that.
The deadline is August 2nd, so you have about a month to apply. And if you don't do it by then no travel grant for you. So,
don't be shy.
We look forward to seeing lots of people at EuroBSDCon. And if you need help getting there, the foundation is taking applications.
Yeah, that's part of our policy of getting more people to these conferences. And please think about applying. Because many people that I talk to are reluctant. I'm not sure whether I've done enough for the project. It doesn't matter. We just apply and we decide whether it's worthwhile to bring you there. So that's our offer.
When filling out the form and describing why it would be useful to FreeBSD for you to be there, I think that will mostly answer the question.
Even if you're a first timer and haven't used FreeBSD much, it might be an eye-opening experience, which has been for many people the first time that they're going to a BSD conference. Okay, next up is the FreeBSD 11.1 Beta 3 is out. So we've been reporting about the Beta 1
a bit earlier.
Yeah.
Just a couple of small changes from Beta 2. Updated the Mellanox 4 driver, so that's the ConnectX 1 and 2. So that it uses static device numbering instead of dynamic numbering. Fixed the problem with the patch utility. Ed committed a small change to BSD install to use the same EFI partition size across all architectures and install types. The big one is they fixed a panic if you're trying to boot a single CPU system. So it mostly impacted people trying to boot in VMs with one CPU. Some VMXNet driver updates and some other network card fixes. But we're well on the road to 11.1 release, and so we're desperately seeking people to fire this up and try it out and let us know any problems they have before it's too late.
Yeah. All the fixes that are found now will be in the release. That are not too difficult to fix.
Yes, but we need your help to make 11.1 the best FreeBSD so far.
Yeah, so get started and testing it. Next up is another Alan and Lacey. They let us know that the video of the Postgres SQL/ZFS talk is online now. So that has been popular with people, and we covered it in the show earlier. They write, "Hey guys, long-time listener, first-time caller. First, small thing, check out the link for the ZFS best practices and standard procedures. While it's at the same slide deck at scale 15x, this talk is actually Percona April 2017. I found the audio for the scale X15 presentation. It's truly horrible," he writes, but he has a YouTube link for people who are willing to bear that. And he was able to play this in the background by zilching his treble a little bit. This talk does not include the information from the notes that we have in the show, so you might want to put them side by side maybe. And there's no live demo of any sort, unfortunately. Sadly, he can't find any Percona audio, but people who are interested in that might want to take a look at that and see whether it's worthwhile to go listen to the whole thing on YouTube.
Yep. I'm not sure if a similar talk was also given at the PGCon, but if it was, then there'll be videos of that soon too.
Yeah, they might have better audio for that, so people just need to do a little bit more searching. Okay, next one is Trapslets. So what's that all about? This is on OpenBSD.
A commit to OpenBSD that the patch converts the NOP padding in the assembly between instructions or whatever on AMD 64 into the int3, which will basically cause an error. The idea is to remove the potentially convenient NOP sled for programs and libraries that makes it harder for the attacker to hit any useful ROP gadgets. So it's exploit mitigation stuff.
Oh, okay. More security coming to OpenBSD, always good.
This one's basically a patch against the GNU assembler.
Directly, so people could probably consume that downstream?
Possibly.
Or is it...
I don't know.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah, here's a comment and suggestions.
This one's in German, so you're going to have to read it.
Yeah. So this one is from the BSD user group in North Rhine-Westphalia in Germany. This is a new thing that's happened, and it's actually the group that's going to help us next week when we have our little Linux Hotel Hackathon there. And so this is a BSD user group forming in the North Rhine-Westphalia area. And what they're doing is pretty much meet every... the intended audience is the people interested in the BSDs in the Rhine-Ruhr area. They currently meet every 2 months in the second Tuesday of the month. And the upcoming dates and more info are on the bsd.nrw website. And they're meeting at the Trivago building. So Trivago has been sponsoring EuroBSDCon for a couple of years. Thanks for that. And they're providing the meeting rooms, I guess, and I guess some of the Trivago folks will also be there. And I think one of the folks from Trivago is also going to be at the Linux Hotel, I'm not sure. But it would be a good opportunity to talk with those people. And if people are in Germany in that area, in the Essen area, they might want to check out that meeting and talk to BSD folks in the same area.
Yep, that's next weekend, isn't it?
Yep, and they also have a Twitter account, and so it's a German-speaking group, but for people in the area or from Germany in general, who want to have a little bit more exposure to other BSD folks, what they're doing, this is a good opportunity to get in touch.
Okay. So on to the emails. Or sorry, first,
don't miss this one, is our sponsor for that section, of course, is tarsnap.com. And Tarsnap, as many people already know, or the new ones who don't already, it's the online backups for the truly paranoid. So you have a lot of backups to do, like everyone does, and you want to save those backups securely in the cloud. That's what Tarsnap provides. And secure means you are the only person holding the keys to unencrypting those, no one else.
Yep. So, your data ends up in the cloud, right? And so it gets put right beside everybody else's data. But each user's data is encrypted with their own key. That way, no one, not even the Tarsnap people, can ever access the decrypted version of your data. Only you have the key, and only you can decrypt it. And if you lose or destroy the key, no one can ever get the data.
Yep, and that's the security.
Back up the key, but keep it safe. But that's the way on purpose, because the amount of replication and backup and so up that happens in the cloud means that you have no way to ensure anything ever gets erased. We saw that bug in Dropbox a couple of weeks ago where it turns out files you deleted 10 years ago are still there. Or maybe not that long. I don't think Dropbox has been around that long. Files deleted many years ago suddenly reappeared because of a database error. So it's like, so all those files I deleted were not actually deleted. Whoops. So encrypting the data and destroying the key is the only way to ensure the data is actually gone. Because maybe it's not gone, but it's definitely not usable now.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, head over to tarsnap.com, sign up, tell them you heard about it on BSD Now. You can start with as little as $5, and it's pay as you go, so you never get a surprise bill because you always pay first. So it's super easy to get started, and it's the easiest and safest way to back up your data.
Yeah, if you know how to use tar, then you can use Tarsnap right away.
Yeah.
Okay,
now
we're right into it. Starting with Joe about home server suggestions. So he writes, "Gentlemen, first off, great show. I appreciate the technical discussions you guys have on the air. I'm a Linux guy primarily, but I like to tinker with the BSDs. My love for OpenBSD can't be overstated, which is why I'm a weekly listener." Okay, that's good. To make a long story short, I'm too cheap to buy a FreeNAS system from my ex, but I want to get a real backup solution for my home. You can find inexpensive refurbished servers on eBay, and finding something with 4 to 8 hard drive bays is pretty easy. What should I look for or look to avoid when purchasing a refurb from my backup solution? Obviously, I'm going to purchase the hard drives new. If the hardware fails, just hopefully not the drives, and I was happy with FreeNAS, I would definitely look into buying one of the FreeNAS certified 1U systems for my ex. They seem to have a really great vendor, or they seem like a really great vendor, but just a little pricey when I'm really just trying to test the waters. Thanks for your help.
So IX's pricing is actually really competitive, but yes, buying used hardware is cheaper than buying new hardware. On eBay and something, there's one recycler called Mr. Rackables. I've bought a bunch of stuff there. They're quite nice. Things to look for in particular are the disk controllers, how the hard drives are going to be connected to the machine. Some of the older stuff that's for sale will have SAS controllers that can't take larger than 2 terabyte hard drives, and this will cause you infinite frustration. In general, I buy Supermicro X9 or newer. I don't ever buy the X8s or older. They're just too old, and the power usage is not worth the money. Spending a little bit more money on newer hardware will save you in the power bill. For a 1 or 2U, generally 2U is going to be cheaper, and that lets you get 8, 10, or 12 hard drives depending on the layout. And so that leaves you extra drive bays to expand into later, because you can start with, say, 4 drives and then add 4 more and then add 4 more. And then at that point, either the server's outlived its useful life, or you can start replacing the first 4 drives with larger ones. I like the LSI disk controllers, but if you have a small enough one and it's got direct attach, so it doesn't have an expander, you can just hook it up to the SATA bays on the motherboard, although usually there's only about up to 6 or so of those. So pretty much anything with 8 or more drives is going to end up having a storage controller of some type. Some of them will have something like an LSI built into the motherboard, and some of them, it's an add-on card.
Okay, so or there also might be options for SSDs.
Lots of advice on the FreeNAS forums about picking hardware.
Yeah, people are building these systems now more rapidly or more frequently than previously, and you have a lot more options with ZFS as well. So,
right now it's in the case where, like, the first generation E5 processors are, the like Sandy Bridge type stuff is old enough now. It's being retired in a lot of places. Like Facebook got rid of all their first gen E5 hardware and went with newer stuff. And so there's just this huge amount of it on eBay, but these machines are modern enough. They support all the features for virtualization, like running Beehive and so on. They can support more than enough RAM that you're going to need. They have new enough BIOSes. They'll have UEFI. They have, disk controllers that can support drives bigger than 2 terabytes. They're perfectly good servers that you can get for, a third the price of something new. And while they're not as good as something new, they're okay. But I ended up with one that didn't support larger than 2 terabyte drives, and enough headache that I literally just turned around and called IX and said, "Can you just build me something? Because this is, I've fought with it too much."
Yeah.
But if you're willing to spend the time and do the extra research and hope that it'll work, you can do it that way too.
Yep. And I mean, you can expand it over time. You don't have to put in all 8 drives at the first build up.
And I've added RAM to my machines and so on.
Yep.
Next question.
Okay. Yep. So the next question is from Steven about general BSD. And he writes, "Hey guys, thanks for the great show. I watch every week." Wow, that's appreciated. My first question is this. Since all the BSDs are separate projects developing in parallel, often coming up with different solutions to the same problem, just how compatible or incompatible are they? When Alan teaches us how to do something in FreeBSD, how likely it is to work on OpenBSD or NetBSD?
It really depends. Like, if you're using Nginx, it's the same on all of them. It's the same even on Linux. Like, where the config file ends up might be different, but everything else is the same. Some of the generic Unix tools are the same pretty much across all of them. Although, like, the way the command to set something in rc.conf it's rcctl, I think, on OpenBSD, and sysrc on FreeBSD. But in the end, it's pretty much the same.
And you see a lot of these commits.
Binaries compiled on one won't just run on the other, but they're relatively close together, and a lot of code is shared back and forth to save time and effort.
Yeah. PF, for example. I mean, we're still lacking behind in FreeBSD, but it came from OpenBSD, and there's still port efforts going on to keep it synchronized with the upstream version. Things like that. I mean, there's a healthy sharing back and forth between the BSDs. Okay, next up is his next question. It's perhaps in a similar vein. Although you could use any of the BSDs for any purpose, wouldn't it be wise to stick it to the one designed for your given needs? Sometime back, he installed OpenBSD with XFCE, Firefox, Office software, etc., and using the great tutorials from BSD Now. It all worked really well, but I still had a system where everything was turned off by default for security reasons, and while it was great that no one else could hack my system, it was not great that I would never be able to hack my own system if it broke. The old plug in a Knoppix USB stick and mount the file system trick didn't seem too promising. And emailing Theodirat to ask my Super Tux card and add-ons weren't working was strictly out. He loves OpenBSD's file system layout and the high-quality man pages, but I guess it was all designed for a different audience. Right.
If you just want a desktop machine, I think TrueOS is the best bet.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you want to have. If you are setting up a server, you don't want to have everything enabled because by then, after 5 minutes, your system is rooted. So that's why we have many things turned off. It might not be that user-friendly for many people because you have to have an extra entry for a service to start automatically upon reboot. So there's a lot of stuff you need to activate first to get it working. But that's why we have these desktop distributions that make it easy for people to get started. But I guess he wants to get more into why the actual, whether you have a specific BSD for any purpose about that.
I don't know. At some point, it's just the one you know. Yeah. So for someone new, I would say TrueOS. But I think, if you've been using FreeBSD for a while, you can probably manage to make it do anything you want it to do. But, if you like OpenBSD, it can do almost everything too.
Yeah, it's personal preference and what you like best. Or sometimes the system you encounter first, you never look at the other systems, but, you should. And, you never know what's around the corner in the other BSDs and might solve your problem or your computing needs better than any other BSD. Yep. And people switch, and you're not set in stone for the rest of the time that you're using BSD, so you can use any that you like. Suggested topics he has at the end: NetBSD install with GUI, a BSD, and the Maker movement, or alternatively an epic rap battle between Brian Cantrell and Theo the Rat as they drop dope rhymes about the features of their respective preferred OSs. That would be amazing to watch. That would be awesome.
I don't know how you would make that happen, but Theo has proven that he will write songs, right, for OpenBSD. So
there could be, it might need some convincing, but it would be interesting.
I think we'd have to get both of them drunk to do it, but yes, that would be amusing.
Yeah, okay, so thanks for the suggestion. We'll keep trying on those fronts, getting those done at a future episode. Next up is Eduardo about it's ZFS encryption general. It's a short one. He writes, "Hi Alan and Benedict, can you both provide an update on the current option for ZFS encryption? Thanks." Yes, we can, because we talked about that at BSDCan's ZFS working group, at least briefly.
So on FreeBSD, one of the options is using Geli full disk encryption and then putting ZFS on top of that. But that's full disk encryption, not ZFS encryption. ZFS encryption is a feature that's being added to the Linux version and then upstreamed into a Lumos, and then will come into FreeBSD. There's still some work that needs to be done to make that work. I've read over the code, and it doesn't look like it'll be too hard, although it won't be, a one-day job either. And I've talked to Matt a bit about it. I think I should send a follow-up note in case you forgot. We decided to split the encryption algorithms into separate feature flags, because I think at first FreeBSD might not support one of the encryption options because it's not a cipher we have built into the kernel, but we do have the other ones. The ZFS encryption option has some interesting features, specifically the fact that you can scrub and resilver encrypted data without having to have the encryption key. So, in particular, the advantage here is that you can unload the key for a specific encrypted data set and basically unmount it, not be able to use it, so it's at rest and it's encrypted while the machine's on. With regular full disk encryption, your data is only really encrypted when the machine's off or when the password hasn't been entered. Once it's booted, all the data is accessible on that drive, right? If somebody has a username or can hack into the system or sit at your keyboard, they can access all your data. So with the ZFS encryption, you can unload the key for a certain data set and say, I don't need that right now, so let's not have it decrypted, and it'll sit there encrypted. But you can still resilver and scrub and even replicate it, like back it up with ZFS replication without needing the encryption key. Those are the things that'll be very useful.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of key management is going to happen then, because different data sets have different keys.
How much you do, right? You can have one key for the whole ZFS pool if you want, or you can be like one key for each user's home directory, or you can be like, I only care about encrypting these two data sets. So I'm going to have one key for that one and one key for that one, and I'm going to be able to unmount them when I don't need them, and I'm going to be able to back them up to my friend's NAS without them being able to access it.
Yeah. So it's coming. It's taking some more time to get it right.
Yep.
But
yes, there's still some work to do to get it so that it'll work on FreeBSD. And I don't know who's volunteering to do a bunch of that work. I'm going to try to do some of it, but I can't do it all.
Yeah, the crypto folks have to look at that, and the security folks, not just the storage people that are working on ZFS. But it's on the horizon. It's within reach, I guess. Okay, thanks for that. And last question for this week is from Joseph about a BGP kernel error. He writes, "Hi Alan, Chris, and JT." Not to forget JT. "I really enjoy the show, and I've been using FreeBSD instead of Linux for my personal servers for that last few years because of Alan talking about it on TechSnap and ZFS, or about ZFS and jails. I run a few small $5 per month VMs on DigitalOcean and Vultr to host my own DNS via Bind, relay mail via Postfix, and host a web server via Nginx, each running in its own jail and all configured with Puppet. Sounds great. I'm attempting to set up Bird Daemon to do BGP on a pair of FreeBSD VMs on Vultr to do automatic failovers for floating IP. When I start the Bird Daemon, I get an error naming socket error, kernel does not support TCP MD5 signatures. It seems that the generic FreeBSD kernel is compiled without a TCP_signature option. I really don't want to have a compile a custom kernel just for that. Is there a reason this functionality is only available with a custom kernel? Unfortunately, the Vultr docs only cover doing this on Linux, and I'm having trouble translating the instructions. It instructs me to set up the floating IP on a dummy interface in Linux, but I can't figure out the right way to do this on FreeBSD. Googled DummyNet, but I haven't found good documentation about what it is or how it's going to use. I think it may not be the same thing as the Linux dummy interface. Thanks for the awesome show.
DummyNet is for traffic shaping, so that's not the same thing. So yes, the TCP signature option is not on by default. It's not something very many people use. Even most BGP routers aren't using it anymore. Compiling a custom kernel on FreeBSD for this would be really easy. You create a new file in the directory, you include the generic, and you add the one line for this TCP signature option, and then you run make build kernel with kernconf equals whatever you named it, and then make install kernel and reboot.
It's all in the handbook, yeah.
Yeah, it's all in the handbook. It'll be straightforward and not scary. You'll just have to redo it every time you update versions of FreeBSD, but that's not that bad. Yeah, for the dummy interface, I think in general the floating IP will just go on a regular interface. You won't need to create a special dummy one or anything like that. Linux is weird with the way it does interfaces. On FreeBSD, it'll just be an alias IP. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
So yeah, don't be afraid of compiling a kernel. It's actually not that hard. There's detailed instructions in the handbook, but you'll make a config file, which will be include generic, add the one extra option for TCP signature. I think if you look in generic or in Linux... Oh,
generic no debug.
Well, generic is no debug if you're running a release anyway. So.
Right, okay, yeah, depends on...
Anyway, if you look in the generic file, you'll probably find the line for TCP signature, and basically make a new file that has the include statement for generic and adds that one option, and then compile that kernel, and you'll be good to go.
Yeah, pointing your current conf to that new file name. Otherwise, it will
You're not the first person that's wrote in about this. So if somebody who actually got it working wanted to write a blog post about it, that would be great.
Yeah, a little tutorial or something.
Yep.
Because I've been looking for BSD or FreeBSD tutorials on the web, and I always find these for Linux well written, but some of these are, well, it's a different path. Well, I can find that, but then there are some specifics are different, and it's very hard to find the right documentation for FreeBSD or BSDs in general. That keeps people struggling, and people who have it running, they're happy about it, but they don't write any documentation about it. Even if it's just a small blog post about it, that will help a lot more people. Yeah, okay. So that's it for this week. So 200 episodes are now recorded and on tape. and there's going to be more, many more, I guess. So thanks for sticking with us, and see you next week.